The word trauma comes from ancient Greek. Originally, it had a purely physical definition, a wound inflicted upon a body. A physical injury occurs in linear time. There is the moment of impact, the immediate sensation of pain, and a progressive process of healing. The body registers the event as it happens, experience until it loops back. This is the mechanical trap of trauma. Missing the event, the survivor endlessly returns to the impact. In her foundational text, Unclaimed Experience, literary theorist Cathy Caruth argues that this delayed structural loop requires us to rethink our understanding of human history. Trauma, she observes, is not the direct imposition of destruction onto the mind. It is the deep enigma of surviving a catastrophic event that was never fully experienced in real time. This paradox first confronted Sigmund Freud in the aftermath of World War I. He observed veterans uncontrollably reliving battlefield horrors in their sleep, an action that seemed to contradict the biological instinct to avoid unpleasurable pain. To explain this, Freud developed a mechanical model of the mind. He proposed a protective shield against stimuli, a psychological barrier that uses anxiety to prepare the organism for incoming external threats. When a threat materializes too rapidly, there is no time for this protective anxiety to deploy. The incoming shockwave violently shatters the barrier before the mind can mount a defense or absorb the stimuli. This creates what Caruth calls the missed experience. The conscious mind wakes up on the other side of the event, having survived the physical danger, but completely failing to grasp the threat of death as it occurred. The recurring nightmare is not a memory of near death. It is the mind's retrospective attempt to master the incomprehensible fact that it survived it all. Freud grounded this theory in a macroscopic metaphor, accident neurosis, commonly associated with catastrophic train collisions. In his texts, he describes a scenario where a victim walks away from the wreckage of a collision, apparently unharmed. In the immediate aftermath, they exhibit zero signs of psychological damage. This timeline maps accident neurosis. An initial collision is followed by a dark zone labeled latency. This gap reveals trauma's true power. The period of forgetting acts as a sealed container, preserving the unassimilated impact of the collision in its original state. Freud eventually scaled this psychological framework into a model for collective history, most notably in his controversial text, Moses and Monotheism. He proposed that Jewish history is defined by a traumatic departure. Instead of a literal return to freedom, he argued that the culture formed around the repressed murder of Moses, an event remaining latent until its effects reappeared generations later. This establishes a strict epistemological rule. History is indirectly referential. The truth of a collective trauma can only be grasped through the absolute inaccessibility of its original occurrence. We see the implications of this rule most clearly in the aftermath of World War II. Following the atomic bombings, there was an immediate international drive to empirically document the physical destruction. Caruth explores this tension through the 1959 film Hiroshima, Mon Amour. The narrative centers on a French actress visiting the rebuilt city. She relies heavily on empirical sight, touring hospitals and museums to assert confidently that she saw everything in Hiroshima. Her Japanese lover relentlessly counters her claims, insisting repeatedly that she saw nothing. He completely rejects her reliance on physical documentation. He recognizes that the French interpret Hiroshima through the lens of their own continuous national timeline. For them, the bombing is understood simply as the end of the war and a triumph of global peace. This celebratory narrative of liberation directly overwrites the unassimilated bodily reality of the Japanese survivors. Their catastrophic past is consumed by someone else's timeline. Inscribing a catastrophic event into a continuous empirical historical narrative acts as a mechanism of erasure. To simply observe the wreckage and claim to understand it is to betray the specificity of those who died. Facing this erasure, the lovers in the film abandon the exchange of historical facts. Instead, they begin to communicate from the inaccessible spaces of their respective traumas. This manifests in what Caruth identifies as apostrophic confusion. As the Frenchwoman recounts her past, she begins addressing the living Japanese man as if he were her dead German lover. She merges her own living identity entirely with the corpse of her lover. She becomes trapped in a continuous loop. entirely unable to differentiate her ongoing survival from his physical death. The Japanese man is uniquely positioned to receive this impossible story. He was away fighting during the war, meaning he missed the atomic bombing that decimated his own family. He too suffers from an unclaimed history. Their connection is not built on empathy, nor is it based on a factual understanding of each other's past. They connect through the mutual recognition of a history that neither of them can claim as their own. This tension culminates in a cafe when the French woman pleads for her lover to understand her inability to separate the living from the dead. He responds with a sudden, violent slap to her face. This act is not about emotional anger. It serves a precise mechanical purpose. The physical shock abruptly shatters the apostrophic confusion and breaks the endless loop of her merging with the dead. This diagram shows the slap splitting the tangled line into two distinct parallel trajectories of trauma, Nevers and Hiroshima. Tracing connections between these lines shows how this marking of difference prevents one narrative from subsuming the other, allowing them to connect without erasing specificity. Here, Caruth delivers her ultimate insight into the nature of survival. True historical witness is inherently relational. It only occurs through this mutual encounter of unclaimed experiences. In a catastrophic era, history is never isolated. We are deeply implicated in each other's traumas. To understand this, we must abandon the illusion of clear empirical observation and instead learn to listen to the voice